In the quaint town of Eldenwood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a leisurely pace. The townsfolk knew each other by name, and gossip spread like wildfire. Among the many stories that circulated, none were as intriguing as the mysterious case of the missing necklace. Chapter 1. The Discovery. It was a warm summer morning when Mrs. Hazelwood, the town's beloved librarian, discovered that her precious family heirloom, a diamond necklace, was missing. The necklace had been passed down through generations and was known to be priceless, not just in monetary value but in sentimental worth. Mrs. Hazelwood was beside herself with worry. She had worn the necklace to a town gala the previous evening and remembered placing it back in her jewelry box before going to bed. But now, the box lay open and the necklace was nowhere to be found. She immediately called the town's only detective, Mr. Arthur Brooks. A tall, slender man with sharp eyes and a keen mind, Mr. Brooks was known for his ability to solve the most perplexing cases. He arrived at Mrs. Hazelwood's house within minutes, ready to investigate. Chapter 2. The investigation begins. Mr. Brooks began by inspecting the scene. The jewelry box showed no signs of forced entry, and there were no fingerprints other than Mrs. Hazelwood's. He questioned her about the events of the previous night, hoping to find a clue. "I remember locking the house before going to bed," Mrs. Hazelwood recalled. "There was nothing out of the ordinary, and I didn't hear any strange noises." Mr. Brooks decided to interview the guests who had attended the gala. He started with Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, an elderly couple known for their love of town events. They had noticed nothing unusual, but Mrs. Thompson mentioned seeing a young man loitering near Mrs. Hazelwood's house late at night. With this new lead, Mr. Brooks tracked down the young man, James, who worked at the local bakery. James admitted to being near the house, but claimed he was only taking a shortcut home. He seemed nervous, but Mr. Brooks couldn't determine if it was guilt or fear of being wrongly accused. Chapter 3. Unlikely Allies. As the investigation progressed, Mr. Brooks realized he needed help. He enlisted the aid of two unlikely allies, Emily, a sharp-witted teenager with a knack for puzzles, and Tom, a retired locksmith who knew everything about locks and safes. Emily suggested they look for any hidden cameras in the area that might have captured something. Tom, on the other hand, examined the jewelry box and the house's security system. He concluded that the box had been expertly picked, indicating the work of a professional thief. The trio worked tirelessly, following every lead and clue. They discovered that a renowned thief, known only as the Shadow, had been spotted in nearby towns. The Shadow was infamous for stealing valuable items without leaving a trace. Chapter 4. The Breakthrough. One afternoon, Emily stumbled upon a vital clue. While going through the town's surveillance footage, she spotted a figure dressed in black entering Mrs. Hazelwood's house through a window. The footage was grainy, but the silhouette matched the description of the Shadow. Armed with this evidence, Mr. Brooks devised a plan to catch the thief. They set a trap by spreading a rumor that Mrs. Hazelwood had recovered her necklace and was planning to display it at the town's museum. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. The night of the display, the museum was heavily guarded, but Mr. Brooks, Emily, and Tom were hidden inside, waiting. As expected, the Shadow made his move. He entered through a skylight, unaware that he was being watched. As the Shadow approached the display case, Mr. Brooks and his team sprang into action. The thief tried to escape, but Tom's expert knowledge of the building's layout allowed them to corner him. With nowhere to go, the Shadow surrendered. To everyone's surprise, he was none other than James, the young man from the bakery. He confessed that he had turned to theft to pay off a family debt, but had never meant to cause harm. Chapter 6. Justice and Forgiveness. James was taken into custody, but Mrs. Hazelwood, moved by his story, decided not to press charges. Instead, She offered to help him find a legal way to resolve his debt. The town, although shocked, admired her compassion. Mr. Brooks, Emily, and Tom were hailed as heroes. The case of the missing necklace became a story that Aldenwood would remember for years to come, not just for the mystery and excitement, but for the lesson in forgiveness and second chances. And so, life in Aldenwood returned to its usual pace, with the townsfolk feeling a little closer and a little wiser, having shared in an adventure that brought out the best in them all.